Do we have any idea what's coming?
Yeah, well, there's two different phases. So if you talk about kind of the attacks in your hometowns that ISIS trained for, they're a little bit more of that October 7th feel. That's where you live, work, and play. Now, the
Mm-hmm.
big Al Qaeda 9/11 plot is there's twofold. There's one piece that's actually not Al Qaeda's plot, it's the IRGC plot against Donald Trump. So his assassination is a piece of the
Yeah.
plot. And then the rest of the plot is Al Qaeda's 9/11 plot. And basically, that's actually an assault mostly on Washington, D.C., and then it's assault on the aviation industry, and they're going to drop airliners with suicide vests.
Are they still trying to do that?
Yeah, they've even moved the suicide vests over the U.S. border already. They got into the country with nobody in the U.S. government has found one of these vests yet.
What? Whoa, let's back up there for a second. How did that happen? And are we vulnerable to this attack? Do we have protocols at our airports to prevent these from, if they're in the country already, how did they even get into the country?
We know one shipment of them came over Nogales. We think it was a Sinaloa cartel, probably through a tunnel. The unfortunate thing is there's been no increase in airport security because TSA's Intel division has decided the vests aren't real and they're not being proactive against them. So there has been no change in security posture at our airports.
And do you have intelligence right now, basically watching the progression of this plot? Will you know when it begins the next phase?
So they already trained everybody and they already deployed everyone. So the next phase would be things like casing, right, or dry runs, and then operation. So unless law enforcement's really paying attention or the public's noticing things, doing the see something, say something, and reporting them, we did have some of those 9/11 hijackers reported prior to 9/11 doing things on airplanes.
Yeah.
If we can get the public more involved, we can see some of those things.
Who uncovered the suicide vest plot to begin with?
So, I mean, it was a mix of people. The thing is we kept hearing about them, but Al Qaeda made a strategic error. And in early November, they took these vests and showed them off in a few terrorist camps in Afghanistan. And that's when it became real because, okay, these vests are real. They're showing them off. They're saying the terrorists that they're for, the U.S. plot. And so when that happened, that's then when we at least started telling the public, right? We obviously had told CIA about it. We got no response. We gave the details on the vest to FBI and asked them to disseminate them to TSA, the air marshals, and the airlines, and they didn't do that. So that's then when we started talking about it publicly to at least get other people engaged to hopefully on the ground levels start doing things. Even when I was in the airport, I want to say 3 months ago, I was actually pulled aside by a TSA employee, and he said, "We're a big fan of you. Keep talking because you're the only one that's going to force our leadership to help deal with these vests." I mean, think about that. A low-level person said, "We don't have anyone like you speaking on our behalf," right? Because they're all going to be blamed when these vests go through, right? So it's very frustrating that their leaders aren't taking this seriously.
So wait a second. When you talk about these vests being shown by the terror leaders in the terrorist camps, basically they're bragging about them, showing their trainees. Are there infiltrators in those camps that are giving you and others intel? Like, how do we know that they were showing those vests off?
Yes, it was reported out of the camps that they showed them off.
And why does TSA think why is TSA rejecting this? Why do they think that these vests don't exist if there's such hard evidence that they do?
So they believed some misinformation. So back in 2023, AQAP put out a video on how to make one of these invisible bombs in your kitchen. It's
Yeah.
actually a whole ruse. So law enforcement focuses on them, and they're kind of big bombs. They put two water bottles together. They're a little bit like the ones from London 2006, kind of. And so in TSA's head, oh, they're not going to get that through a magnetometer, but that's not at all what the bomb looks like. It's made in a laboratory. It's much smaller, concealed so much better than in that video, but they only have the video in their head, and without having visual confirmation, they only go off of what they know. They aren't creative enough to understand things have evolved, technology has evolved, and TSA isn't evolving with it.
So there's no visual evidence from the sources inside the terrorist camps who reported on the suicide vest. There's not like a picture to show TSA. And so they're choosing the video of this clunky water bottle bomb because they can see the tangible evidence, and ignoring the intel because it doesn't, the intel on the suicide vest because it doesn't come with a photo.
Yeah, and you can't even bring phones into these camps in Afghanistan, and then there's not even any kind of service anyway. But yeah,
right.
They unfortunately have to see the vest, which we were hoping the vest would be found at the border. They unfortunately weren't, right? We have had discussions with different people. So we talked to ATF about the vests and the size of these bombs, and they do say the bomb can take down airliners. So they do, at least some people who have explosive experience in the US government say yes. But what Al Qaeda is saying and what the vests look like, they will work. But until you have a physical vest, it's so hard to get people to do anything. We're very bad at being proactive.
Yeah. So is there a hunt going on right now, I imagine, to get your hands on one of these vests?
Yeah, I mean, there's, as you can imagine, volunteers hunting the vests. I'm not going to give too many details about it. I don't think there's a very strong US government push, even though we've told the US government these vests moved in most cases and most of the time, the vests, and there's also other things like fully automatic weapons, they move through fentanyl pipelines. So we've been asking people in the government, if you do a fentanyl raid, if you take a fentanyl trafficker, search for the vests, but then ask them about it, right? Like, think about it. If you're getting arrested for fentanyl and you could provide something on Al Qaeda, that is like a gold ticket, right? It's like, use it, bargain with these people. There are people in the fentanyl pipelines who know about these vests. Like, be proactive about it.
And what's the government's response when you suggest that?
I mean, in one case, I did flag one person that was detained by DHS that I do believe moved the vest. I don't know that what ended up happening, but I originally was told, yeah, they don't believe he has any ties to terrorism. I said, of course he doesn't have ties to terrorism. This is business. He got paid. He moved vests.
So it was a fentanyl it was a fentanyl trafficker that you had evidence that he was tied to also trafficking the vests, but because he wasn't tied to an Islamist terrorist group, the government discounted the connection, even though he was he was a mule, essentially.
Well, that was the original. He's not connected to terrorism, was what the person was told that I told. And I said, it doesn't matter. Ask him anyway. So I'm hoping they did. But of course, if they did, it's not like they're going to pass back something classified to me, you know? So I know.
They might if you ask
them.
We're
trying. Yeah, we're trying. So the more people who know this, the more times they can ask these type of people and pull out this information. Because at the end of the day, think about it. You're a fentanyl trafficker. You're not going to like put your neck on the line for Al Qaeda. You just
no. In fact, it's a good plea deal opportunity. If you are in fact talking to a Fed, it probably means that your fentanyl trafficking business has been busted. In which case, you're facing a lot of prison time. You should turn on the terrorists because you know they're not going to do anything to you, you infidel, just because you help them with their plot. Do we have any idea of the location? Meaning, like, if you're talking about a fentanyl pipeline, is this mostly along our southern border? Have they been disseminated to different states along some of these fentanyl trails? And if so, where?
So we don't know exactly if it was Al's southern border, because they did talk about the northern border fentanyl pipelines too. And there's a mix of things. So they move suicide vests, they move fully automatic weapons, and they move some suicide bombers through fentanyl pipelines, mostly probably the south, but it could also be the north. So we can't just rule out, because there's plenty of easy movement across the north too, as you know.
And you mentioned earlier in the show that you feel it's most likely that this would happen through a regional airport that doesn't have the full scanner machine. Any idea which regional airports are being considered for this?
Well, you just have to go find out, like, if your local one has a millimeter or not. And then the terrorists have done the research of which airports don't have millimeters. And I don't know all the ones that don't. I mean, I think like maybe Bozeman, Montana doesn't have one, right? Yeah. So some of these small little feeders, I know the one near my hometown, like right, they don't have one. It's a small little, you know, you get on prop jets to leave. So it's those type of ones, but there's a lot of those.
And then what, they would just make a connection to a bigger airport and then go to I guess wherever they were going.
Yeah, well, it's even like the underwear bomber, right? So he went through Amsterdam to come to the United States to then do, you know, the bombing that was a failure because he kind of like wet his pants. But remember, that was 2009. So the underwear bomber trains in Yemen. He wears the underwear bomb on the plane. So he goes through security in Yemen, goes home to Africa, stays a few months. He leaves Africa, goes through security again with the underwear bomb, goes to Amsterdam. They make him go through security again. He goes through with the underwear bomb and then gets to Detroit. That was in 2009. Think of how much they've advanced that same bomb since then. And nobody is like being honest that it worked in 2009. Why is it not going to work in 2025?